I think my sex doll might be alive. I'm not some creepy guy. I don't spend all my time wishing girls would like me because it'll scary, I won't lie. People talk about the uncanny valley, where something looks almost human but not quite, and it's creepy. That's how sex dolls are. They're made for people who buy them, so they look like the perfect kind of pretty. They're perfectly symmetrical, no flaws, just perfectly beautiful. It's like they were made for people who watch too much adult stuff and don't know what normal looks like. It was kinda helpful that the doll looked weird. It reminded me that it was just plastic and rubber, and I didn't need to be scared of it. I decided to call her Elsie. My first week with Elsie was less exciting than you might think. It took me a couple of days to get used to talking to her. Before I got Elsie, I wrote my thoughts in a journal on a cheap computer, so I didn't talk much out loud. Sometimes, weeks would go by without me saying anything. But when I finally started talking to Elsie, I couldn't stop. When you haven't had a real conversation in years, even a silicone fake starts to feel good. I told her all about my job, every detail of my week, from cleaning toilets to vacuuming the carpets. I talked about my favorite movie, The Last Man on Earth, and book, The Nightland, and what I did in my free time, not much. I talked about my hopes and fears, my dreams, and my goals. I must have spent hours just talking to Elsie. By then, I thought of her as a she, instead of an it. I started wishing that she could talk back, that her lips would move and she would laugh, or tell me things about herself. On the last day of my first week, I actually slept in bed with her. I don't mean it in a bad way, I literally slept next to her. I had never shared a bed with anyone, and I guess I still haven't, but it was new to me. I turned on her breathing and warmth, tucked her into bed, and just listened to the noises she made. It felt so good that I slept better than I had in years. At first, it really seemed to be working. Even having a pretend relationship helped me be a little less afraid. I managed to say, hello, to the security guard at work, and he seemed surprised but not uncomfortable. He just smiled and nodded. I was starting to feel happy, a little more confident. Not too much, though. When I went shopping, I still waited until the late hours, when there were no people around, and I still used the self-checkout. I was too scared to talk to the cashier. Years ago, the self-checkout machines were closed, and I didn't buy groceries for a week because I was too scared to call and see if they were open. But now, I thought maybe I could make that call if it happened again. The first sign that something might be wrong happened a month after I got Elsie. When I left for work, I placed Elsie's hands in her lap, sitting on a chair in my bedroom. When I came back, her hands were hanging at her sides. I thought I must have forgotten how I left her, or maybe her hands weren't in a good position and they just dropped. I was a little scared, but I figured I could explain it. This was just the beginning. Sometimes, when I got home, she would be in a different position than when I left. But nothing too strange. If her legs were crossed, they weren't anymore. Hands on a table were no longer folded. If she was sitting up straight, she'd be slumped a bit. I just thought maybe gravity was pulling her out of position. Things got weirder when I was in bed with Elsie one morning. My work is from 7 p.m. to 3 a.m., so I go to bed around 4 a.m. unless I'm at the store. I always turned on her breathing and warmth because it helped me sleep. I was about to fall asleep, listening to her breathing sounds, when I heard strange moans. They sounded really dirty, and I didn't want to hear them at all. You have to understand, I never actually used Elsie for what she was meant to be. I thought about it a few times, but I could never actually do it, so these noises were totally new. For a second, I didn't even realize Elsie was making the noise because I'd never pushed the button that made her moan. I jumped out of bed, freaked out, and hid in the corner. I was trying to calm down and ignore those terrible sounds coming from my bed. Finally, I forced myself to push the button that made the moaning stop. I looked around for anything that might have accidentally pushed the button, but I didn't know what happened. It was behind her back, and it took some force to push. It seemed impossible that I could have accidentally hit it. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. That was just the beginning of the sounds. More and more often, when I got home from work, I would find Elsie turned on, and she was always in different positions than when I left. Once, she was facing the door, like she was waiting for me, her chest moving up and down like she was actually enjoying herself. I had left her facing the wall. It was hard to fall asleep. As soon as I was drifting off, the nice, quiet breathing sounds would be replaced with those horrible moans. I stopped sleeping with her, started wearing earplugs, and moved her to the living room. The empty bed made it harder to fall asleep, but I was scared to be in bed with her. It felt like I was arguing with a girlfriend, even though I had never been with anyone. The moaning never stopped. Even when I wasn't in bed with her, I heard it in my dreams. I saw the doll in my dreams, without her pajamas, with her naked silicone skin. She chased me through a maze made of squirming, moaning bodies, all melted together into walls and hallways. I would wake up screaming, drenched in sweat. It seems obvious now that I should have gotten rid of the doll when the dream started, but you have to remember that the time before she changed and started moaning was the happiest I'd ever been. I was chasing that feeling, wanting so badly to believe that I could be happy again. I knew it wasn't healthy, that I was forgetting how good I had felt because of this obsession, but I didn't care. I thought about cutting the soundbox out of her, or at least disconnecting the button. I was convinced there was something wrong with the button, and that's why she was making noises. I flipped her over and pulled up her pajamas, exposing her rubber back. I held a kitchen knife because it was the sharpest thing I had. A scalpel would have been better, but I didn't have one and I couldn't wait to order one online. I moved the knife slowly towards her back, where the button was, but as I got closer, her body started to move, and she started breathing. I dropped the knife and started to cry. I couldn't do it. I knew it wasn't real. It wasn't human. But I couldn't do it. I pulled her pajamas back down and put her back in her chair. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean it," I said to her, looking at the floor, feeling ashamed. The doll just stared at me. Her face was blank and unmoving. Always was, always would be. The worst thing happened just last week. I slept bad and woke up super late. My alarm didn't go off. I rushed to get ready for work, but I couldn't find my work ID. I usually left it on my nightstand, but it wasn't there. I grabbed my backup ID from a drawer and went to work. It was raining hard when I got to the office building. I used my ID to get in, and I managed to say a quick hello to the security guard before starting work. I had to clean the carpets that day, so I got the cleaning machine and started working. It was pretty quiet for the first half of my shift. I was listening to classical music on my headphones. After 4 hours, I had a quick lunch, a sandwich and some tea. When I went back to work, it was still quiet, just my music. But after 11 o'clock, I heard a faint sound. I paused my music and took out one earbud. It was a weird sound. I couldn't make it out. I turned off the cleaning machine and listened closer. All the blood drained from my face, and my heart started racing when I recognized the sound. Somewhere in the building, I could hear those gross, exaggerated moans. I dropped the cleaning machine and ran towards the sound. I felt like I was back in my dreams, running through the maze of rubber bodies. I ran around a corner and saw a blurry shape moving down a hallway. It moved awkwardly, like a puppet controlled by someone who didn't know how to do it right. The moans were getting quieter, like whatever was making them was running away. I ran as fast as I could. I wanted to see what was making those awful sounds. I wanted to be wrong. When I reached the hallway, there was nothing there. I listened for the moans, trying to figure out where they were coming from, but it was silent again. I wondered if I was crazy, but I went back to cleaning and finished my shift. When I went to my car, I saw the night guard sleeping. When I got home, things were even worse. Elsie was gone. I searched everywhere, the closets, even the attic. I'm normally too scared to go in the attic, even in the daytime. I couldn't find her anywhere. I made sure all the doors were locked, got into bed, and locked my bedroom door. I was so tired from all the excitement, and even though I was scared, I fell asleep. I had another dream about the maze of moans. Elsie chased me. She moved faster and faster, and then I felt her cold, rubber hand grab my shoulder. The walls were made of wriggling bodies, and they moaned with pleasure. I woke up terrified, my heart pounding. I nearly fainted when I realized the moans hadn't stopped. They were coming from under my bed. I grabbed the flashlight I kept on my nightstand in case of an emergency. I jumped out of bed, turned on the flashlight and pointed it under the bed. It was like the light would protect me. I unlocked my bedroom door while I kept facing the bed, with my hand on the doorknob just in case I had to run. I started to bend over so I could see under the bed, but my hand was shaking, and the flashlight beam kept moving. She was staring at me. Her blank eyes looked at me from the darkness. Her pajamas were wet from the rain. She was holding my work ID in her rubber hand. Her chest was moving up and down like she was breathing, and she moaned. Then all the sound stopped, and her chest stopped moving. I must have sat there for hours, waiting for her to move, but she just stared at me like a dead fish. Finally, I pulled her out from under the bed and put her on a blue plastic tarp. I rolled her up in the tarp, tied it with rope, duct tape, and zip ties. It looked like the kind of thing a serial killer would use to get rid of a body. I drove to the edge of town and threw the tarp into a dumpster behind a grocery store. I was worried that someone would see me and I'd have to explain, but nobody noticed. I expected to hear some muffled moaning, but the tarp was quiet. I drove home and triple-checked all the doors and windows, then called in sick for work. I laid in bed and cried. Sometimes, I feel bad about what I did, especially when I'm alone in bed after work.